Mark.
Well, thank you all for joining us here to talk about finding the next big thing. And it's not just finding the next big thing in general, but it's finding the next big thing in minority communities, among women entrepreneurs. And when I first got the assignment to do this panel, I thought, what an interesting thing to talk about, because you would think that in the VC world, it would be the ultimate meritocracy, where it's all about the great idea. But it's not necessarily the case. Susan, how bad is it when it comes to diversity in venture capital?
It's not a good story. So right now, less than 10% of all venture funding goes to females. Less than 3% if the founder or the CEO is female. It's somewhat understandable if you think back to where technology started. Initially, tech, because it was very expensive to develop, technology got sold. The customer was usually a man at a large corporation. So it was B2B sales, and that's where all of the big legacy VCs began. But since the iPhone came out initially, and everybody's got a smartphone in their pocket, the end user for most new technology is very different. It's a consumer. And if you look at the fastest growing parts of the internet right now, social, all the social platforms except Reddit, and mobile commerce, which is driving an enormous amount of commerce now, they are dominated by women. And so the fact that more venture capital is not going to women seems ill-informed, but a great opportunity for those of us who are focused on it.
Yeah. And William, you've made the point that it's also about access and how minority groups sometimes, because they're not represented amongst the decision makers, that closes off access to that network.
Right, right. I mean, I think that what we also see is the lack of capital and the very small number of women that are funded and people of color that are funded is very much reflective of the people making the decisions, because the venture capitalists are well over 90% male, well over 90% white, and there are very few people that look like me or even look like Susan that are in the room making a decision about an investment. And so as you think about the way the industry works, and it's very much a relationship-driven industry, both in terms of how deals get funded and who gets funded, if you're not a part of those cultures, and you're not naturally connecting with them and having what I call collisions with them, then it's that much harder for you to kind of make it from point A to point B and to secure the kind of capital that you need. And I think it's beyond just the capital. It's about having smart capital. It's about having people that are involved with your company that have been there, done that, know who to call immediately, and know how to help you get to an exit. So it's one thing to raise $1 million, it's another thing to raise $1 million from people who know what they're doing.
And then know what to do with the $1 million once you get it, right? To navigate that whole process. What have you found, Matt?
So, here in Miami at Knight Foundation, we launched an effort about 3 years ago focused on trying to help build the entrepreneurial ecosystem here. From events like eMerge Americas to creating mentor and funder networks, co-working spaces, all the things that are part of a startup community. And our thought from the beginning is really finding ways to leverage Miami's unique diversity as a key differentiator and competitive advantage. So how we've been thinking about that is things like here, for those of you who are from Miami, familiar with Miami, we actually have the largest and most diverse campus-based college in the US, right here, Miami-Dade College. And so we actually created something called the Idea Center sitting within Miami-Dade College that's loosely modeled after the Harvard iLab, right? Meanwhile, trying to sort of, in addition to things like that, we're just launching something called the Babson Win Lab, which stands for Women Innovating Now Lab, which is a program that Babson started in Boston and now is launching here in Miami. Or Power Moves, which focuses on Black entrepreneurs and was started in New Orleans, is now launching in Miami. Meanwhile, then trying to sort of create an environment where it's even at a very early stage, we have particularly more women entrepreneurs involved in technology. So things like Girls Who Code, which provides a summer camp for girls to learn technology and to begin to change what has been a really alarming trend in terms of the numbers have been so poor. So the hope is that here in Miami, which relative to Steve Case earlier was talking about how more than 75% of the venture capital went to California, New York, and Massachusetts. Here in Miami, and which is very much an emerging startup community, the hope is that we can sort of put the pieces together where we can actually sort of deal with sort of go about it in a different way that we've seen, and hopefully then that creates this really important competitive advantage. Because after all, the theory is, sort of the enemy of innovation is isolation. And the more that we can create an environment where people from different backgrounds and life experiences and personal histories are connecting and colliding, ultimately, sort of the richer the set of ideas created, and ultimately the greater the impact. Right. And the hope is that we can do that here.
I think the good news is that you're seeing an enormous number of young entrepreneurs who are ignoring the fact that the statistics don't look great for them. We've seen 900 companies with female founders since we launched BBG Ventures 20 months ago. 900. And literally every day I spend time, the whole time I was here before we came on stage, I was answering emails from people who were saying, we'd love to get time with you to show you X, Y, Z. And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing. So there is this wave at this point of young Americans, and I would imagine young Americans from the Southern Hemisphere as well, who are coming out of universities, coming out of B schools, coming out of consulting, coming out of companies who think, I have an idea to do this better. And they have enough examples out there that they believe they can get started. And the other great thing about technology right now is that it has advanced to the point where you can take something to market, see whether there's a market fit without spending millions of dollars. So it allows people to at least get their feet wet, get a product out there, see if people want it, and then they can go out and start trying to raise money.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that what we're finding is that once you say you're looking for a certain type of individual, where many people just assume that they didn't exist. I still get this. I had this happen last night. Someone said, well, you probably don't see a lot of deals, so probably deal flow is your biggest issue. I'm like, no, I just need somebody to respond to my emails because I can't.
The assumption is that there aren't that many minority entrepreneurs.
Right. I mean, I've looked at over 2,000 deals in the last 4 years, and it's not even, and that's just scratching the surface. So it's not like they haven't been here. We haven't, we didn't just all of a sudden decide we want to be entrepreneurs. That desire has always been there. But when you look at who's been searching for and willing to go outside the comfort zone to find them, that's not historically something that the venture business does. We very much tend to focus on what can I get access to in my own network and in my own geography. And when you take those boundaries off and you say, hey, I'm willing to go to the southern part of the country, you've got a whole region of people that were hoping that this opportunity would happen. And the more you get people to have an open mind, I think the more we're going to see different types of companies being built, bigger companies being built, because they're going to be depending on their ability to connect with a larger and broader part of the population. We just haven't seen that yet.
Right.
But I think that's what's next.
Yeah, I mean, the costs to create and do are dropping dramatically. And so as a result, more and more people can launch efforts of different kinds and do it at a speed unlike we've ever seen. And that just presents such an opportunity to remake communities that are outside of the places that have been considered the primary centers of innovation really in the world. And so it's sort of, for us here in Miami, our thought is this presents an opportunity to sort of reach out and grab hold of, and thinking that this can be a real source of transformation from a community standpoint. I mean, I think we talk about, in terms of building a vibrant and interconnected startup community, with the thought of it can be a great source of retaining and attracting talent, jobs, economic development, all of that. But it also sort of presents this other opportunity of, if we can do this well in our communities, where it becomes a source of social mobility, we have sort of greater social equity, hopefully, as there's more opportunities across the community. And I think that sort of presents, as we move forward, sort of a sort of a twofer, right? I mean, not only creating sort of vibrant centers of innovation, but places where it's actually spread out across the community in a really meaningful way.
So I'm sure there are many, many entrepreneurs out in the audience. I'm curious, if you are, let's say, a female entrepreneur, how do I get an audience with you, Susan? What are the steps? It seems like there are a lot of people out there who now want to encourage minorities and females, but how do I get your attention?
So we get a lot of deal flow from other entrepreneurs who we know. So if you can find someone who has been in to pitch to us, or who has worked with me at some point, and I've been working for many, many, many years, so there's a lot of people out there who do know me, that's great. But if you don't, then you can always email us at hello@bbgventures.com. And every single email we get gets an answer.
Really?
So it may be that what you're doing doesn't fit into our guidelines. We do consumer internet companies. We focus on things like marketplaces, commerce, content and media to a little extent, connected devices and mobile services. And there are certainly things, we've got 30 companies now in our portfolio, so there are things that don't fit into any one of those 5. But every single company has to have a technology advantage. So by that I mean the fact that you're building a better water container, that's not going to be something that we'd invest in. There needs to be some technology involved that we believe is going to give you a competitive advantage out there, or create some kind of moat around your business. It could be patents, but it can be a lot of other things too. It can be data collection. It can be a unique way of selling using technology. But those are sort of the guidelines we follow, and people have gotten to us all kinds of ways. So it's not at all impossible.
Have you funded a company that cold emailed hello@bbg.com? You have?
Yes,
Okay.
we
so
have.
it works.
Yes, it does work. And there are certainly a number of companies who cold emailed, who we have met with. So, yes.
William, how do I get an audience with William?
So not as easy as it works for Susan. So I'm a venture fund of one, so it's really just me. And at the moment, I'm kind of running the entire portfolio, which is on both coasts. And I also manage some other work that we did with some accelerators. So all in, we've probably funded somewhere around north of 60 companies over the last 4 years. And so my inbox at any given moment includes all of those folks asking for updates, et cetera. The most effective way to get to me so far has been through founders that we funded. And interestingly enough, some people who have pitched who did not successfully receive capital, but thought highly enough of the process and the experience to be willing to kind of serve as a surrogate. The thing that I kind of tell people is, I get a lot of pushback, like, hey, it's not fair. It's hard enough to connect with people who are venture people, and now you're making it just as hard as it is with anyone else. But I always tell people, you want to try to stack the deck in your favor as much as possible. And so if you have a way of getting to someone who knows us, that's your best way, because it's not much different than if you go back to your college days, your dating days, and someone just came out of the blue and said, hey, I want to take you out. That's probably not going to work. But if someone says, hey, I've got someone you need to meet, you're at least willing to entertain that phone call, right? So it's not much different. It's kind of human nature. We have done one investment where the company reached out to us on Twitter, and it just completely caught us off guard. Someone responded, they engaged in a conversation, but simultaneous to that, someone else at the company was in conversation with another one of our deal team members about a completely different topic. But as a result, the name popped up in the meeting. Someone else said they heard about the company as well, and we haven't announced it yet, but that company's here in Miami, and that investment will be
That's great.
made known
Wow.
That's great.
in a couple of weeks. So I just tell people to just really hustle and do your homework. And then, yeah, I meet people at conferences and other places, and we have a chance to chat, and it takes some time to develop a relationship, but it works. It's totally happening.
And I can sort of vouch for the fact that William has been a ongoing and continued presence here in Miami, which has
is
just
true.
been terrific.
Which is probably a
Am I
good thing
giving
about it.
feedback? Am I hearing? Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's your mic.
There's feedback.
You don't have a device on you, do you? iPhone or something? That can cause interference.
Aha.
Let's
See if
put
this
that away
makes
and
a
see if that works. Here.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you for bearing with that. We're getting a little bit more, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's.
We'll see if we can resolve it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, okay. How has crowdfunding changed the landscape? Has that sort of democratized the process a little bit?
I think for certain kinds of startups, crowdfunding is fantastic. If you are making something that you are going to sell to consumers and you can demonstrate that enough people were willing to buy it sight unseen, it's a great marketing tool. And I think that's largely the way people think about it going in. Yes, you get to, you would hope, raise enough money to create your prototype and X number of products, but it's more than that. I think it's a great way to get awareness about what you're doing out there into a broader community.
Have you gotten any crowdfunding sort of data as part of a pitch? Is it
Sure,
convincing to you?
absolutely. In fact, we've invested in several companies that started out through crowdfunding. A company called Gotenna that is doing communications devices that work when there's no cell coverage and no wireless. And so they're great for completely off-grid sports and for concerts where it's really hard to find any place where you can get a text message, but they use very low frequency radio waves to allow you to send a text and your location. And the way they got off the ground was with a Kickstarter.
Wow.
We'll see how this goes. We just actually, we're trying that here in Miami with a group called IdeaMe, idea.me, which is a sort of the Kickstarter of Latin America, and trying to create an opportunity for Miami entrepreneurs here to be able to leverage investors across Latin America to get funding here, and hopefully then to find their way to
great.
people like this. I think I'm still giving feedback, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah? Maybe, I'll try and get a handheld microphone. Maybe we'll try this.
Or maybe get the phone
Even further?
further away.
Excuse me, you guys.
Troubleshooting on the go here. So William, how is crowdfunding?
I
Have
get a
you
hand-
seen many people who've gone initially through crowdfunding? And would you advise against it? I mean,
Yeah, so I have a kind of a,
Your mic is hot.
I don't know, love-hate relationship with crowdfunding. I think that what we're now seeing, clearly when it comes to people who want to be investors, so AngelList and things like that, we're seeing more and more platforms that allow people to become investors in startups. And I think that's one class of that. With companies that are hardware focused, this looks like a fantastic way, to Susan's point, of getting something in the market and getting some indication about whether or not this is going to resonate. And I have some companies I've worked with that have done that successfully, and it's allowed them to kind of sit down credibly in front of an investor and say, if we do build this, they will actually come because we can prove it.
Right.
I think that the downside, or my concern as it pertains to crowdfunding, is twofold. One, I think that a lot of people feel like this is my opportunity to be a professional investor, and to do so without as much information as everyone else has.
Right.
That's scary. And then the other piece of that is many entrepreneurs need more than the money, and I think I mentioned this earlier. At this stage, particularly at the seed stage, it's not just about getting funded, it's about getting some really good assistance and advice. And there is truly still a shortage of that. It's harder to get that and to get access to that, and just kind of making things available and making it easier for people to get money that just gets you started. But as we're seeing now, and especially as the economy starts to tighten or just be uncertain, getting from the seed stage to the Series A, that next round of funding is so hard. It was hard before, now it's even harder.
Right.
And to not have people in your corner that can help you navigate those waters just really puts you at risk for losing the money that you raised from a whole bunch of people anyway. So
Right.
I'm really concerned about how that completely plays out.
I don't think that that anyone should be thinking about using crowdfunding to get from 0 to a Series A. But I think it's a really rational way to think about getting a product off the ground, seeing whether there are people out there who would pay real money for this, and also whether you can tell a story that's going to make people excited. So there's lots of experimenting you get to do using a platform like that that I think is great. At that point, you know, if you can get your product literally off the ground and manufactured through some kind of crowdfunding, then you got to go get seed funding, and that's like step 2, and that's when you see whether this idea that 5,000 people bought or 500 people bought is actually going to make it into the market.
Right. I think you straightened out your issue.
I think it's better. Is
Oh,
that
yes, that's-
much better?
Thank you for
Sorry,
troubleshooting.
you guys.
So you're talking about IdeaMe.
Yeah, so the thought is Martha is listening to this discussion. I mean, it still is sort of these, finding finding an entrepreneur to invest in. Oftentimes it comes through another entrepreneur you invested in. So it seems it's sort of one thing for all of us to continue to work very hard to do is to open up those networks, is to find more and more ways that entrepreneurs can sort of find their way in front of investors such as this and have those validators. Right? And so things like a crowdfunding platform, like IdeaMe, which we just launched, so try it out, take a look, is one way to do that. But I think from a community standpoint, we need to continue to find ways with which we can sort of get in these networks. Obviously, the hustle is so important. Grabbing each of you as you're walking through, the exhibition hall, or doing a direct message on Twitter or a cold email. But hopefully, we can also create other ways in. Crowdfunding platforms is one way to do that. Another way to do that is to just create more opportunities for connection. Whether it's gatherings such as this, whether it's organizations such as we here in Miami. One of the issues is that there is wealth here, but if you're actually trying to connect with angel investors, it's really hard to find them. How do you? So one of the things that we tried to help launch is something called Accelerated Growth Partners, which is an angel network which just brings together local investors. Entrepreneurs at an early stage are vetted and get to pitch to them. And it's become a very effective tool for early stage entrepreneurs to sort of to get into the networks that investors have. And rightly so, are relying very much on other entrepreneurs who've been successful for referrals and ideas.
I'm curious, William, because when somebody sends an email, a cold email, for instance, to Susan, chances are they know that Susan's interested in women entrepreneurs, so she can tell. When they email you, I would assume from your standpoint, there's no assumption that that person is a minority.
No, so many times.
So how do you make it clear that you
many
are
times
one?
the email says, like, hey, I'm an African-American entrepreneur in St. Louis, or whatever the case may be. I do get a fair amount of just blind, hey, I heard you have money, I want some money, this is what I do.
And how does that go over?
Did not go over well. So, I think that one of the things that is a little awkward, to be quite honest, is to sit down with an entrepreneur and to have to try to figure out, do they qualify for the fund, right? Is this person actually African American, biracial? Like the whole thing is which is kind of ridiculous, right? And so what I've really done is I've tried to take the approach that, we don't have to talk about that piece. We'll get to that part later because I have these connections in with Comcast Ventures, which allows me to kind of direct you to some other entity within our group, perhaps for funding. But more importantly, I've built out a network that allows me to say, hey, Susan, I have this woman, she's fantastic, and I can't do the deal, but if I could, I would. Would you be interested in taking a look at it? And so we've tried to make sure that any no, if we've had a chance to have a meeting, that the no is not just a no and that's it. It's a no with some type of direction about where the next step could be. And that goes for anyone. And so that allows me to kind of see everybody, because you don't want to be in a situation where you can only meet with certain people and that's it, because it basically creates the same problem we have today, which is you're only meeting with certain people and that's it. So you have to kind of figure out different ways to get creative about how you deal with it. I'm sure Susan's run across people just say, hey, I think you need to meet with him. And
Absolutely.
you just do, because it's a benchmark for you to figure out what's good and what's not.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah. Is that a criteria for your program, is there an edge there, and how do you make it clear without being too presumptuous and banking on that aspect of your, potential?
Yes and no. I mean, in some ways, without even, in a place like Miami, where, uniquely among U.S. cities, over half the population is actually born outside the U.S. than in, right? So there's sort of a unique diversity inherent to the place. But that said, we still, though, try to be very intentional, with some of the grants that we're doing. I mean, for example, focusing on Babson Wind Labs, which is very intentionally focusing on women entrepreneurs and creating that sort of opening the funnel more, where more women entrepreneurs can find their way into this network here. And hopefully it gets much easier when the time is right and they need funding to get in front of investors such as this. Or like Power Moves, which is very intentionally about Black entrepreneurs and trying to be very, very intentional, here in Miami, where it's an African American entrepreneur, whether it's a Caribbean, a Jamaican American, Haitian American entrepreneur, that they have sort of a way into this network and then can have access to the resources that they need at a particular time. Because the thought is the life of the entrepreneur, the problem they're solving varies. It's not just, obviously getting funding is often really important, but getting mentorship, connecting with other entrepreneurs, sort of feeling like part of a community. And sort of and being able to sort of, your struggle is one shared by another. It's not just sort of a solitary pursuit, but hopefully that by being very intentional to in the case of Miami, to folks across the community, that can create a way in which more and more have the opportunity, when the time is right, to be sort of, to have those validators and to sort of to be in the sort of in the in crowd, I guess. So it's not always just trying to resort to the cold email.
I think Matt's really right too, that one of the best things you can do is to help build a community of entrepreneurs, because when you're starting out, it's so important to be able to hear a lot of other people's ideas and to understand how good your idea is, whether it's going to make it. And you only get that from contact with other people who are doing the same thing, who can give you feedback, who can tell you about somebody who's a really, great engineer who's looking to leave XYZ and might be interested in what you're doing because of X. But the more you can build that ecosystem, and it really is an ecosystem of entrepreneurs and angel investors and talent, right? That's where you get a city that suddenly takes off, like Denver has, like Austin has. There are certain cities outside of Silicon Valley, outside of New York City, that are real tech centers. And they are tech centers because there's talent there, but they're also tech centers because people want to live there. And people want to live here in Miami. So you have a big head start just from that. It's a livable city. You can afford to live here in many cases. So lots going for it. And I think finding a way for entrepreneurs to find each other and ultimately to find angel investors is what's going to allow it to take off.
We certainly hope to see you down here more. Williams,
As
become
much
a regular.
as I can.
I'm always here.
Especially from November to May.
When it's sunny and 80 degrees, that's when you find William down here. What are some of the, I have the feedback problem now, yeah. I think we have feedback off each other. What are some of the new emerging cities that you are starting to really look at, besides the Austin, besides the Denver? What's upcoming?
Yeah.
For me, so obviously I'm here quite a bit. I'm here every other month. The other city that I'm spending quite a bit of time in is Atlanta. I think that Atlanta is so very quickly, a lot of venture capital firms have just basically written off the southern part of the country. And I'm from North Carolina, so this is kind of home territory for me. And I think that Atlanta is unique in that it has a top-tier institution like Georgia Tech, along with some other historically black colleges and universities that have a tremendous level of passion and desire to get into the startup scene. And they've had quite a few exits out of Atlanta, both on the enterprise side as well as on the cybersecurity side. And so I think it has the potential of being a sleeping giant.
What are your exits mostly? Are they sales to other companies?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. We've moved past this era where companies were just going public left and right. I think the more likely exit opportunities are from other companies, but we're also noticing that those companies, the typical ones that everyone thought were going to be the big acquirers, they're not acquiring either. So I think we're going to see a lot more pressure on the companies to be real companies before they get acquired,
Right.
as opposed to, hey, if I don't grab it now, then someone else will. Now it's, well, no, actually, let me see your numbers before we figure out how much we're going to pay for it.
And Susan, I would imagine some of it is the same for you, and I know we have a couple minutes left, but has what's gone on at Theranos changed the way, I mean, a high-profile female entrepreneur, and it seems like a lot of the claims the company has made may not necessarily be true in terms of the accuracy of their technology.
Yeah, look, I'm heartbroken about it because I really like Elizabeth, and I think what they were trying to do was really important. It was allowing people to get blood tests for far less money and with far less blood taken. And there are questions now about whether the process they were using, which is patented and was very innovative, is working well enough to justify not only the price that they were raising money at, but also whether it's going to be a real solution. I still hold out hope that the company can make this work, so I'm not willing to give up on it yet.
It's not a setback necessarily yet.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's also, look, there's always a challenge when you start up a company and it's a tech startup, you are encouraged to create a vision of what you are going to become, right? What's the big idea here? And I think on a certain level with Theranos, they started talking about the vision as a reality. And it may be that it will take them 3-5 years longer to get where they want to be, but it's not the end of the world to have to take a step back and really get it right. I just hope they'll be given the chance to do that.
It's a good lesson, really, for any startup out there.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Last word to you, Matt, because we're out of time. Number one piece of advice for entrepreneurs? I mean, it's a tough market, as we've talked about.
Well, I mean, I guess my thought is, look, the challenge is in front of us, right? I mean, sort of the talent has always been everywhere, but opportunity has always only been in select places. Now the genie's coming out of the bottle, and I think it's up to all of us to ensure that the opportunities are spread to all of the talent across all of our communities to build and do as we want to, and to solve the problems that we want to solve.
Okay. Thank you to our panelists. A great discussion. Susan, William, and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.